Really, we're interviewing for cultural fit far more than we're interviewing for skills. Honesty is a superpower commodity, but there's a fine line there where it can come across as arrogant and you can put the interviewer off. There is the connection with the interviewer or the interviewing panel. And, basically the touching of hearts where you think, we like this guy, but it's because all the other boxes have been ticked.
Yes.
So like the foundation's there. And then you can think, we'd like to work with this guy. Like you say, that conversation was really, really good. If you can do that in the interview, it's very, very valuable. And it requires a little bit of telling a story or a little bit of chance for people the interviewer to, hey, oh, you did that, and then that happened, and then what did you do? Sort of thing. Yeah. So having the courage to do that was very helpful.
Yeah, true. And he did answer to the point. That was the most beautiful part of it. The way you connected this whole thing is very beautiful, Nick. Like as an employer, Red Rock is known for the quality of the trainings, quality of customer client management, maintaining the relationships, and you've been at the front of it. And every single ones that you've employed across the years, which I have interacted with, you look for values, motivation, and ways of working plus. So when we just focus on these three areas, could you give us some examples as to what a prospective candidate should show for you to tick these boxes?
I think, Rifki, for us, the biggest characteristic is humility. So that means a willingness to learn. And, the challenge is when you're going for an interview for a company, you're potentially thinking, these guys are doing a lot wrong. I can make a massive difference here and I know how to do that. That might be true, but it really doesn't come across very well if you say that. It comes across as being arrogant. And also, like in our world, we're working with lots of people in leadership roles. We're not actually doing those roles. So it's inherent that people say, we're not judging these people in these roles. And if we were actually doing those roles, then we would be in a position to say, you could do this differently. But we don't want to be judging the people that we're working with for how they should do things differently and better because we're not in that role. So that level of humility is super important. And if you're able to bring that characteristic into the interview, that, hey, I really want to contribute. I really want to bring some innovation and I want to bring what I've got. At the same time, I want to learn. Those things are good, but there's a fine line there where it can come across as arrogant and you can put the interviewer off. So having a level of, I do want to learn, and bringing that in and having that genuine heart as well, I think puts you into a very good place for working with an organization. So we employed a lady in North Africa, and this lady was a remarkable presenter. She was fantastic. And in this particular country, presenters are kind of like celebrities. But then my colleague has observed her doing a session, and she said, now put your hand up. Put your hand up if you lie. That's a difficult question. She said, come on, let's be honest about this. So she was going in a totally different route than we wanted to go in. But on the paper, she was incredibly competent. Really, we're interviewing for cultural fit far more than we're interviewing for skills, because skills can always be learned, but cultural fit, you don't get the right person, they're probably not going to change. That famous story, from good to great, get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus. So when you're interviewing people, I'm thinking, is this the right person to get on the bus? That's the big question.
Yeah. And I've seen that at the events that you organize, the Red Rock, I think the knowledge sessions, and everyone who interacts, they know how to conduct themselves, they know how to approach. And they don't approach as salesmen, they approach as somebody who wants to have a meaningful conversation. So I think you've amply demonstrated that, Nick. So thank you very much. Every single event of Red Rock, I've truly enjoyed.
I said that's very kind.
It's the truth. So we've started off with what we look for as recruiters, as employers, the cultural fit, the demonstration of evidence, the proof, the outcomes that we look for as employers. So all that comes into place when we find the right CV, when we find the exact set of information which suits us, which is always kind of like a target, it's like a hit and miss kind of a thing. What advice can we give, the prospective employees, the candidates? So let's just say in a resume and in LinkedIn, what do we look for?
Yeah, that's great question. So I think the first thing is you're probably not going to be sending the resume to somebody of your age and your culture. I get lots of resumes, lots of CVs, and the first thing I look for, well, I don't deliberately look for, but I'm looking to see whether there's any punctuation, spelling mistakes, because I'm thinking if the person in a CV is making mistakes, that's a poor indicator. And it's very easy in a bullet point list to have one bullet point with a full stop at the end, and then two bullet points without full stops. So, and immediately I'm noticing that, and it's giving me a signal. And so, but the person who's writing it, they're not thinking that they're writing to a middle-aged bloke who's going to look at that. So like just getting your head around, who is this going to and what are they going to be looking for? Second thing, so the presentation is massive because most of us are very busy. So we're going to skim read stuff. And so, but what we're seeing is the presentation. So getting the presentation consistent and really good, very important, because then once I've got past my initial judgments on how much time has this person put into this, then I'm starting to read it. Then the next thing is very succinct, evidence-based. Yeah. So if it starts with I'm a great person, I'm super skilled at sales and very, very personable and all of this sort of stuff. It's immediately put me off as well. What I want is I'm looking for a job in sales. I've got this experience and these are some of the outcomes of the work that I've done. But just be as succinct as possible and then evidence-based and clear and concise. And what's more important probably than the CV is the email that you send it with. I get a lot of CVs that look like they've come from an automated system. I know they haven't, but somebody's sending them out to 100 companies. And it's a numbers game, isn't it? Getting a job. You've got to send out your resume to a lot of companies. But when I get a resume with an email that says, I've been following your company, I like the way that you've done this, and I'm really interested in your work in this area, I'm interested. Because they've spent a bit of time to understand our context in our company. And then that has a transformative effect on me. I'm going to look at that CV. So polish the CV, get it right, really work hard on it, make it succinct and evidence-based, and think carefully about the email that you wrap around that resume when you send it to someone. And I think the key takeaway there is, Rifki, whether it matters or not is irrelevant. What matters is who you're writing this to. What's important to them. But if you're applying to a super contemporary software company, tech company, and actually then they're bothered about, they want speed and they don't really care about all that stuff, then you need to know that. But a lot of the time you are sending your resume to somebody older, and that's really worth thinking about. What does that generation value? And we're visual people. And so the presentation immediately is impactful.
Yeah, usually when the interviews come to us, it's like the second or the third round. Like as seasoned employers, you and I, we are old school. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But then there is value to it, Nick. We are looking for culture. We are looking for professionalism. We are looking for attention to detail. Even with the new generation who's more tech savvy than me, I would tell them is pay attention to your CV, pay attention to how it's done. You want to make it colorful, that's entirely up to you. I can understand the new gen wants that, but make sure it's neat. Make sure it communicates to us before we meet. Lead us to the LinkedIn profile and there is something in you that we see as a potential to our organization.
That's very good, Rifki. And we would expect people, wouldn't we, to put their CV through Claude or another AI engine to refine it, etc. And when you do that, just go back through it very carefully to make sure it's completely honest. So that's also very helpful. Great to put it through, refine it with an AI engine, but then make sure you go back through that very carefully. Because if an interviewer picks up any sort of scent of automation and self-generation, then it's a red flag to say we've really got to work hard now to make sure this person is genuine about what's been put down on the CV.
So we've come to the end of our podcast. it's important that the audience, the people who are looking for jobs, especially the young ones who's graduated from school and university and college, employers hire outcomes. They look for evidence of skill, strong signals that communicate reliability and the person's ability to communicate clearly, and how well they fit into the organization and how well they can fit to the role, which deserves a lot of elevation, a lot of value addition to it. Nick, would you mind adding some closing remark to our candidates and your potential employees of the future?
Yeah, I've got two things, Rifki, on that. So I think first thing is when you turn up to the interview or writing your CV, recognize you have a lot to give. So again, not in an arrogant way, but you as an individual have a lot to contribute to a company, to a team, etc., etc. So that level of self-worth as opposed to self-confidence is really important. And then secondly, the kind of number one handrail is be honest. Be absolutely honest. And it's super helpful when people say to me, I've not done that, I don't know how to do that, rather than to try to cover that up with, I did that sort of in this project. So honesty is a superpower commodity in an interview, to be able to be honest. And it will then immediately tick lots of the boxes of commitment, of reliability, of all of those things, because you're thinking this person is genuine. So be courageous to be honest about what you haven't had experience in, or what's gone wrong. If your kind of experience list has gaps, the interview is going to be straight on to that. And if those gaps are because things went wrong for you, you got sacked from a job, it was really messy, etc., then be honest about that. And then you're on solid ground, and it does well for you in the interview rather than takes away. And Rifki, for people listening, I think it's a super challenging role trying to get a job. And it is very discouraging when you get rejected, and especially if you get rejected a lot or you can't find interviews to actually attend. And the number one quality for people is perseverance. So bear that in mind as well when things don't go well getting a job. The number one thing to do is to keep going.
That's absolutely spot on. So to our audience, we hope this podcast helps you get employment with a well-established organization, for example, like Red Rock, especially those who are applying outside of the Middle East or outside of Doha. This is what we look for. This is what you have to see. And I think a lot of the larger mature organizations will have the same set of expectations that we've continued. So be sure to subscribe, like, share, comment, and reach out to myself and Nick on the links below. And thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much, Nick. To our audience, we do hope this podcast brings a lot of value to your next career move, to how you develop a CV, to how you apply for jobs. And we do hope that it benefits you immensely as a person. And thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Nick. Goodbye.
Thank you, Rifki. Bye-bye.